The year was 2049 when humanity made contact with the Valkorians, an alien species from a distant star system. The first signals from their planet were picked up by Earth's deep space exploration team, causing a mix of excitement and fear among the leaders of Earth. Who were these beings? What did they want? And most importantly, would humanity be ready for such an encounter? A team of diplomats, scientists, and military personnel was quickly assembled to travel to the Valkorian homeworld. As they made their way across the stars, the excitement among the crew was palpable. After centuries of searching for signs of life beyond Earth, humanity was about to meet another civilization. It was a dream come true for many, yet there was a nagging fear in the back of their minds. What if these aliens were hostile? What if they were more advanced and saw humans as inferior or expendable? Upon arrival, the humans were greeted by the Valkorians in a grand ceremony. The alien city was a marvel of technology, towering structures that seemed to grow organically from the land, shimmering with energy fields and covered in soft blue light. The Valkorians themselves were tall, graceful beings with smooth, pale skin and large, expressive eyes. They spoke in a melodic language that resonated through the minds of the humans, a form of communication that transcended words. The humans, though awestruck, were cautious. They had been prepared for this moment, trained in diplomacy and communication. Yet the moment they arrived, they felt something was off. The Valkorians didn't seem excited or thrilled to meet them. Instead, they appeared empty, as if something important was missing from their eyes. The leader of the Valkorians, a figure named Zalnath, addressed the humans with a calm voice. "We have waited for you, Earthlings," Zalnath said, his tone gentle but tinged with sadness. "Your kind has something that we have lost long ago, something we cannot reclaim on our own." The humans were confused. What could they possibly have that the Valkorians needed? The team's translator quickly processed the message, but it only raised more questions. "We are the last of our people," Zalnath continued. "Once, we were a thriving species, capable of incredible achievements. But now, we are broken. Our civilization has withered. We have lost our will to fight, our will to survive. Our world is dying, and we do not know how to save it. But you, humans, you have something we do not. You have the strength to carry on, no matter the odds." The humans exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't what they had expected. They had imagined technology, alien knowledge, or perhaps new alliances. But the Valkorians weren't seeking weapons or resources. They were asking for something much more intangible: hope. Zalnath's eyes met the human delegations with a deep sorrow. "We have watched your people for years. Despite the hardships you face, you never give up. You fight. You survive. We do not know how you do it, but we believe that you can teach us. Please, help us find what we have lost." The humans were stunned. They had never imagined that their greatest strength, their will to survive, would be the very thing that could save an entire civilization. They were faced with a choice. Could they really help the Valkorians? Would their unbreakable spirit be enough to restore a species on the edge of extinction? As they pondered the request, one thing became clear: humanity's journey with the Valkorians had just begun. As the human team settled into the Valkorian capital, it quickly became apparent that the Valkorians were not just looking for help. They were desperate. The entire planet seemed to be under the weight of a quiet, deep despair. The once great cities of the Valkorian Empire, now in ruins, told the story of a civilization that had lost its sense of purpose. The once beautiful landscapes, teeming with life, had begun to wither. Plants were dying, and the once thriving ecosystems were crumbling. The humans were taken on a tour of the Valkorian world, a journey that opened their eyes to the depth of the alien race's struggles. In the grand halls of their capital, they saw walls lined with ancient records of their history, images of proud warriors, explorers, and scholars who had once pushed the limits of science and technology. Now these records seemed like memories of a distant past, locked away and forgotten by a people who had lost the will to fight for their future. Zelnoth, the Velkorian leader, guided them through the ruins of an old research facility. "This was once our greatest achievement," he explained, his voice soft but full of sorrow. "Here we unlocked the secrets of the stars, conquered distant planets, and brought prosperity to our people. But that was long ago. Our people no longer care for such things. We have lost our desire to achieve, to grow. Our minds are weak, and we do not know how to fix it." The humans could feel the weight of Zalmoth's words. They had always been taught that hope was something you created, something you fought for. Yet, the Velkorians seemed to be waiting for hope to appear on its own, as if it was a thing that could be found or given, rather than something that came from within. As days passed, the humans learned more about the Velkorian way of life. They had no wars, no challenges. Their technology had advanced so far that they had little need for effort or struggle. Everything was automated, from food production to healthcare. The Velkorians lived long lives with minimal hardship, but in this ease, they had become hollow. Without challenges, without purpose, their spirits had faded. The human delegation worked day and night with Velkorian scientists, trying to understand the source of this emptiness. The Velkorians had no diseases, no natural predators, and no conflicts. Yet they had lost their drive to achieve, to dream, to survive. They had everything, yet they felt nothing. A young human scientist named Emily found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. How could a species with such power, such technology, have lost the most important thing of all, the will to live? She had grown up on Earth, a place where survival was always a fight. The idea of a life without struggle seemed foreign, impossible. It was hard for her to understand how the Velkorians had let themselves fall into such despair. One night, as Emily sat in her quarters, staring out at the dimly lit Velkorian city, she realized something important. The Velkorians weren't asking for help in the way they expected. They didn't want more technology, more knowledge. What they needed was something deeper, something humanity had in abundance, the belief that life was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The human team began to refocus their efforts. They would try to teach the Velkorians about hope, about pushing forward even when it seemed impossible. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be easy. The Velkorians had lost so much. Could humanity really help them find their way back? Or was it already too late? With a heavy heart, Emily joined the others in preparing for the next phase of their mission, uncertain of what the future would hold. The days on Velkor were becoming harder for the human team. They had learned so much about the Velkorians, but they were still uncertain how to help. The Velkorian situation was more complex than they had imagined. Their civilization, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed to be drifting aimlessly, like a ship without a rudder. But the human delegation was determined to make a difference. They weren't ready to give up. Emily, the young scientist, had an idea. She believed that the answer to the Velkorians' problem wasn't in technology or scientific solutions, but in something simpler, the human spirit. She remembered the stories from her childhood, tales of people who fought against impossible odds, of heroes who never gave up, even when it seemed like the world was falling apart. She had always thought of those stories as just that, stories. But now, they felt like something real, something that could save the Velkorians. The human team began to hold daily meetings with the Velkorian leaders, trying to teach them the core of what it meant to be human. At first, the Velkorians seemed uninterested. They were used to perfection, to efficiency, and they struggled to understand the idea that strength could come from overcoming hardship. "We don't need to fight for survival," said Zalmoth, his voice laced with confusion. "We have everything we need. Why should we struggle?" Emily and her colleagues tried to explain. They spoke of Earth's history, of wars fought, diseases conquered, and disasters survived. They told the Velkorians about explorers who journeyed into the unknown, about inventors who failed countless times before they succeeded. They shared the story of the human race, a story of struggle, but also of hope, of never giving up, even when things seemed impossible. But the Valkorians couldn't see the connection. To them, the idea of struggling seemed unnecessary. They had no need for wars or pain. Their bodies were perfect, their minds sharp. They had everything they could ever want, but they didn't understand why it wasn't enough. In one meeting, Emily shared a personal story. "I come from a world where survival is a fight," she said quietly. "Earth isn't perfect. There's poverty, hunger, and conflict. But we still keep going. We wake up every day and face the challenges, because that's what makes life meaningful. If we had everything handed to us, if life was easy, we wouldn't appreciate what we have." Her words seemed to strike a chord with Zalmath. He looked thoughtful for a moment. But still, the Valkorian leader couldn't quite understand. "But why fight? Why endure pain and suffering?" he asked. Emily paused before answering. "Because in the end, we don't give up. We keep going. And that is what makes us strong." Over the next few days, the human team continued to share stories of perseverance, resilience, and determination. They showed the Valkorians examples of humanity's greatest achievements: the first flight, the moon landing, the fight for freedom. Slowly, some Valkorians began to listen, their eyes lighting up with the smallest spark of curiosity. One day, as Emily was walking through the city, she noticed a group of Valkorian children playing in a park. They were running, laughing, and engaging with each other, something she hadn't seen much of in the adults. It reminded her of Earth, of the energy, the joy, and the hope that still existed, even in the darkest times. She approached them, smiling. "What are you playing?" she asked. One of the children looked up at her, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "We're pretending to be explorers. We're finding new worlds." The child's words struck Emily deeply. For the first time on Velcor, she saw the first signs of the spark she had been looking for. The Valkorians hadn't lost everything after all. There was still hope, still the potential for growth, and maybe, just maybe, the human spirit could help them rediscover it. Emily returned to the human team with new hope in her heart. She knew it wasn't going to be easy, but now she believed the Valkorians could find their way back. They weren't as lost as they thought. They just needed a little push, a reminder of what it meant to keep going, no matter what. And the humans were ready to help them do just that. Despite the growing efforts from the human delegation, not everyone on Velcor was convinced that the path humanity was showing them was the right one. While a small group of Velkorians had started to open up to the idea of struggle, of perseverance, and of fighting for a better future, there was a larger faction that rejected the very notion. To them, the concept of struggle was unnecessary. They had built their entire society on ease and comfort. Why should they change now? This group, led by a powerful Valkorian named Varnuk, was the opposite of Zalmath's open-minded approach. Varnuk believed that the teachings of the humans were nothing but primitive nonsense. He saw it as a direct threat to their way of life. The Valkorians had thrived for centuries by avoiding conflict, by creating a world where suffering was nearly impossible. To Varnuk, the human idea of survival and hardship was nothing short of barbaric. As tensions grew, Varnuk began to gather followers, using his position and influence to spread his message. "Why fight for what you don't need?" he would say. "The humans come here and tell us we must suffer to grow. But we have outgrown that. We have moved beyond the need for struggle. It is unnecessary, and it is dangerous to think otherwise." The rebellion led by Varnuk was quiet at first. Subtle acts of resistance, like the refusal to attend meetings with the humans, or the destruction of human-sponsored programs, aimed at teaching the Valkorians the value of hard work. The Valkorians who joined him believed that the ease of life they had built for themselves was a symbol of their success, not a weakness to be overcome. Emily noticed the change in the air. At first, it had been the hope of progress that filled the Valkorian cities, but now there was a quiet tension, like a storm that was about to break. The division among the Valkorians had become more apparent. with many openly questioning the humans' efforts. They were starting to fear that embracing humanity's ideals might lead them to a path of unnecessary pain. One day, Emily and the other humans were called to a council meeting. Zalnoth, who had become an ally, spoke with urgency. "The resistance is growing," he said. "Varnuk and his followers are gathering strength. They believe that allowing your teachings to continue will destroy everything we've worked for." Emily felt a heavy weight in her chest. They had only just begun to reach the Valkorians, to teach them the importance of perseverance, and now it seemed that all their efforts could be undone by one man's fear of change. But Zalnoth was firm in his resolve. "We cannot let fear stop us. Change is never easy, but it is the only way forward. We must show them the value of what you bring, even if it means we face opposition." The humans and their allies decided to take a stand. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult. The Valkorians weren't accustomed to conflict, but now it seemed they would have to face it if they wanted to survive. The rebellion would force them to prove just how strong their will really was. Emily couldn't help but wonder how much time they had left. Could they convince the Valkorians that change was the only way to save themselves? Or would Varnuk's fear of struggle pull them back into the same despair they had been in for so long? The path was uncertain, but one thing was clear. If the Valkorians were to have any chance at redemption, they would have to face their own resistance. And so would the humans. The tension on Velkor was reaching its breaking point. Varnuk's rebellion had grown stronger, and the divide between those who embraced humanity's teachings and those who rejected them was widening. The Valkorians were at a crossroads, uncertain of which path would lead to their future. Zalnoth, the leader who had once welcomed the humans with open arms, now found himself facing the impossible task of bridging this gap. Amid this struggle, a young Valkorian woman named Thalia began to emerge as a surprising force for change. Thalia was not a powerful leader like Varnuk, nor did she hold a high position in society. She was simply an ordinary citizen, quiet, reserved, and once indifferent to the politics around her. But something had changed within her. She had been one of the first to start working with the human delegation, quietly observing the human way of life, especially their resilience and determination. At first, Thalia had been skeptical. She had grown up in a world where everything was easy, where the idea of working hard for something seemed unnecessary. But the more she spent time with the humans, the more she began to feel something she had never felt before: hope. She saw how they lived their lives with passion, how they fought to survive even when the odds were against them. Thalia realized that this was the spark the Valkorians needed, something they had lost long ago: hope and purpose. One day, after a particularly heated meeting with Varnuk and his followers, Thalia decided to act. She knew that if she didn't speak up now, nothing would change. Gathering her courage, she stood in front of the group of Valkorians who had been following Varnuk's teachings and spoke with a quiet but firm voice. "We have forgotten what it means to struggle, to fight for something. We have lived in comfort for so long that we've lost our way. But we are not weak. We are not doomed. Look at the humans. They fight. They survive. They do not give up. And that is why they are strong." At first, the crowd was silent, unsure of how to respond. But slowly, something began to shift. Thalia spoke of the things she had learned from the humans: their ability to overcome failure, their courage in the face of danger, and their unwavering will to survive. She told them that no matter how perfect their technology was, no matter how easy their lives had become, the greatest strength lay in the ability to keep going, even when things were hard. Her words rang true. As she spoke, the eyes of the Valkorians in the crowd began to soften. Some of them had never considered the idea that struggle could be a source of strength, but now they were listening. Even Varnuk, who had dismissed the humans' teachings as foolishness, seemed momentarily unsure. "I know it's hard to understand," Thalia continued, "but we cannot move forward if we keep avoiding hardship. We must learn to fight for our future, just as the humans fight for theirs." Her speech marked a turning point. Over the next few days, more and more Velkorians began to question their beliefs. They couldn't ignore the truth in Thalia's words. While the fear of change still lingered, Thalia's courage sparked a new sense of hope in the hearts of many. Zelnoth, watching from the sidelines, knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for. The tide was turning. The Velkorians had finally started to see that without the will to fight, they could never truly grow. And it was Thalia, an unlikely hero, who had sparked the change. But the struggle was far from over. Varnuk and his followers would not surrender easily. The battle for Velkor's future had only just begun, and it would take everything the Velkorians and the humans had to show that the will to survive was the key to their salvation. The winds of change were blowing through Velkor, but not everyone was ready to accept them. Varnuk and his followers, though shaken by Thalia's speech, remained determined to preserve their way of life. They believed that struggle was unnecessary, and that the human way of life was dangerous. For them, change meant chaos, something they feared deeply. As Thalia's influence grew, the divide between the two factions became more evident. Zelnoth, once the hopeful leader of the Velkorians, now found himself in the middle of a battle, not just for his planet's survival, but for its very soul. The humans had offered hope, but the Velkorians were still afraid, and fear was a powerful force. The human delegation had worked hard to teach the Velkorians about resilience, but they knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. The Velkorians had to experience the value of struggle for themselves. They had to see what it meant to fight, to survive, to grow through hardship. But how could they show a species that had never faced true adversity the strength that came from it? One day, Zelnoth called a meeting of the human team. "We need a plan," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "The Velkorians are divided. We need something that will force them to see the truth that life is not meant to be easy. But we cannot force it upon them. It must come from within." Emily, who had been with the delegation from the beginning, spoke up. "What if we put them in a situation where they have no choice but to fight for their survival? We can create a challenge, a test that shows them the strength they have inside. It would push them to their limits, but in a controlled way. We can show them that struggle, while difficult, is what makes them strong." Zelnoth considered this idea. "And what kind of challenge do you propose?" Emily thought for a moment. "What if we take them into the wilds of Velkor? There are regions here that are still untamed, dangerous areas where the environment itself is a challenge. If we lead a group of Velkorians there, they will face the harsh realities of nature. They'll have to work together, overcome obstacles, and learn what it means to rely on each other. Only then will they understand." Zelnoth hesitated. "It will be dangerous. Many of our people have never faced anything like this." "But that's the point," Emily said. "It's not about the danger. It's about teaching them that they can survive, that they can thrive, no matter what comes their way." After a long discussion, Zelnoth agreed. They would take a group of Velkorians, both from Thalia's side and Varnuk's side, into the wilds of Velkor. The journey would not be easy, but it was the only way to show them the power of struggle. As the group prepared for the journey, Thalia joined Emily. "Are you sure they're ready for this?" she asked, concern in her voice. "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But if they're going to survive, they need to learn how to fight for their future. They need to see for themselves that the human spirit can survive anything." The group set out, leaving the safety of the city behind. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the Velkorians faced the harsh conditions they had never experienced before: treacherous terrain, unpredictable weather, and scarce resources. But they soon discovered something extraordinary. Even in the face of danger, they began to work together. They learned to rely on each other, to overcome their fears, and to push forward when it seemed impossible. And slowly, the spark of change began to grow within them. The Velkorians, who had once rejected the idea of struggle, now began to see its value. They realized that survival wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about facing it head-on and growing stronger because of it. But the journey was far from over. the wilds of Velcor had only just begun to test them. The real challenge was still ahead. The journey into the wilds of Velcor had begun, and the group of Velcorians, along with the human delegation, faced their first real test. The lush, vibrant forests of their home planet were beautiful, but they held dangers that most Velcorians had never encountered. For centuries, the Velcorians had lived in a world where they were shielded from the harsh realities of nature. Now, they were stepping into a world that demanded more from them than they had ever imagined. The group was led by Emily and Thalia, both of whom had spent time in Earth's wilderness. They knew that the key to surviving the wilds wasn't just physical strength. It was mental toughness, the ability to think clearly under pressure and to work as a team. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the first challenge arrived quickly. A heavy rainstorm swept through, turning the ground to mud and making the paths nearly impossible to follow. The Velcorians, accustomed to the comfort of their perfect cities, struggled. They were used to technology that kept them dry and comfortable. But now, they had nothing but their wits and the tools they had brought with them. Zelnoth, the leader of the Velcorians, was the first to show signs of doubt. He had never been tested like this before. "We cannot continue like this," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "This is madness. We were wrong to come here. There's no need for this." Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "This is exactly what you need. Sometimes, the world doesn't make things easy, but you are stronger than you think. We just need to keep moving forward." Thalia, who had grown more confident in herself during the journey, spoke up. "We can do this. We're already here. Giving up is not an option." The Velcorians looked at each other, uncertain, but something was beginning to shift within them. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. Slowly, they began to work together, helping each other through the mud, sharing food, and setting up shelters. It wasn't easy, but they were starting to understand that survival wasn't about avoiding discomfort. It was about facing it together. As the days passed, the challenges kept coming. They had to climb steep cliffs, cross fast-moving rivers, and navigate through dense forests filled with strange and dangerous creatures. The Velcorians, who had never faced anything like this before, were pushed to their limits. Some stumbled, some hesitated, but they all kept moving forward, one step at a time. By the third day, the group came to a deep ravine. The only way across was by crossing a narrow rope bridge. The Velcorians, accustomed to relying on machines, were terrified. The bridge swayed dangerously in the wind, and the rushing water below seemed like an impossible obstacle. Zelnoth, who had been silent for much of the journey, stepped forward. His face was pale, but there was a determination in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "We must cross. There is no other choice." One by one, the Velcorians began to cross the bridge. Some moved quickly, while others hesitated, their hearts pounding in fear. But with each step, they grew more confident. And when the last Velcorian reached the other side, there was a sense of achievement that none of them had ever felt before. Emily watched them with pride. "You did it," she said. "You didn't give up." As the group continued on their journey, the changes within them became more apparent. They were beginning to understand the value of struggle, of pushing through the pain and fear. It wasn't easy, but they were becoming stronger with every step they took. Yet, even as the group grew stronger, the wilds of Velcor still had more tests in store. The toughest challenge was still ahead. Would the Velcorians have what it took to survive until the end? Would they be able to overcome their deepest fears and doubts? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: they had come further than anyone had ever expected. The journey through the wilds of Velcor had already tested the Velcorians in ways they never imagined. The harsh terrain, the wild animals, and the constant struggle to survive had pushed them beyond their limits. But there was one final trial that would determine if they had truly learned the lessons they needed to save their people. As they reached the edge of a dense forest, Emily stopped and looked around. The air was thick with tension, The Valkorians had grown stronger, more united, but now they faced their greatest challenge yet, the desolate peak. It was a mountain that towered above them, its sharp cliffs and rocky slopes making it almost impossible to climb. But Emily knew this was the test they needed to prove that they had learned the true meaning of perseverance. Up there, Emily pointed, is where we need to go. It's the only way forward. Zalnoth looked up at the mountain, his face filled with doubt. The climb looked impossible. The rocks were jagged, and the winds howled around the peak. It was a dangerous path that few had ever attempted. For a moment, he considered turning back, but then he looked at the Valkorians around him. They were tired, but they were not the same people who had set out on this journey. They had learned to work together, to trust each other, and most importantly, they had learned that they could survive, even in the most impossible situations. "We can do this," Zalnoth said, his voice steady. "We've come too far to turn back now." The group gathered their strength and began the ascent. The path was steep, and with each step, the air grew thinner. The wind howled, making it difficult to keep their balance. But they pushed on, one step at a time, determined to reach the top. Thalia, who had once been uncertain about this journey, was now leading the way. She had found a new sense of strength within herself. She had faced her fears and had come to understand that it was in the struggle that she truly found her power. But the climb was not without its dangers. Halfway up the mountain, a sudden storm hit. The rain poured down, and the wind picked up, threatening to knock them off their feet. The Valkorians huddled together, struggling to keep their footing on the slippery rocks. The storm raged for hours, and their progress slowed to a crawl. Zalnoth looked around at his people, his heart heavy with doubt. Were they strong enough to finish? But then he remembered the lessons they had learned in the wilds. They had come this far because they had faced each obstacle together. They had relied on each other, and that was their strength. "Keep going," Zalnoth shouted over the storm. "We are stronger than this. We are not alone." The group pressed on, using every ounce of energy to push forward. The storm eventually passed, but the hardest part of the climb was still ahead. The final stretch was the steepest, the most dangerous. As the Valkorians neared the summit, one of them, a young Valkorian named Mylan, slipped and nearly fell. In that moment, it seemed like everything was about to unravel. But Thalia, without hesitation, reached out and grabbed his hand, pulling him back up. "We don't give up," she said, breathless but determined. "We never give up." Together, they made the final push to the top. When they finally reached the summit, the view was breathtaking. They could see all of Velkor laid out before them, beautiful, vast, and full of potential. The mountain had seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but now, from the top, they could see that they had the power to overcome anything. The group stood in silence for a moment, looking out at their home, knowing that they had passed the test. They had learned that strength did not come from avoiding difficulty, but from facing it head-on and never giving up. As they made their way down the mountain, Emily smiled. They had done it. The Valkorians had proven to themselves that they were capable of surviving, thriving, and facing whatever came their way. The journey had not been easy, but it had changed them forever. The final trial was over. But the real challenge had just begun, the fight to bring the lessons of the wilds back to Velkor, and to show their people that the power of struggle was the key to their future. The journey had been long and difficult, but the Valkorians had emerged from the wilds stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. Their time in the wilderness had taught them the most important lesson they could learn, that survival, growth, and strength came not from avoiding hardship, but from facing it head-on. As the group made their way back to Velkor's cities, the weight of their experiences hung in the air. They had been changed, and they could feel it. There was a new sense of purpose in their steps, a quiet determination that had not been there before. Zalnoth, who had once been doubtful and uncertain, now walked with confidence. He had seen the power of struggle, the strength that came from working together and never giving up. He knew that the future of Velcor was no longer about avoiding challenges. It was about embracing them. "We've learned the truth," Zalnath said to the group as they neared the city. "We cannot live in comfort forever. The only way to move forward is to face the challenges ahead. We have the strength to do it. We have the will." The Velcorians, who had once rejected the idea of struggle, now understood what Zalnath meant. They had faced the wilds, they had faced their own fears, and they had come through stronger for it. They were no longer afraid of the unknown, because they had learned that they could survive anything if they worked together. As they entered the city, word of their return spread quickly. People came from all over to greet them, eager to hear about their journey. But the stories they shared were not about the dangers they had faced or the hardships they had endured. Instead, they spoke about the lessons they had learned, the importance of perseverance, of teamwork, of never giving up, no matter what. Philia, who had once been shy and unsure of herself, now stood before the crowd with confidence. "We've learned that life isn't about avoiding difficulty," she said. "It's about facing it, learning from it, and growing stronger because of it. We are not weak, and we are not helpless. We are a people capable of overcoming anything." The crowd listened in silence, absorbing her words. They could see the change in the group, their determination, their strength, their unshakable will. Slowly, the people of Velcor began to understand. They had lived in comfort for so long that they had forgotten the value of struggle. But now, thanks to the humans and the journey through the wilds, they were beginning to see the truth. Varnuk, who had once led the resistance against the humans' teachings, now stood at the back of the crowd, watching. He had resisted change, fearing that it would destroy everything the Velcorians had built. But now, as he listened to Philia's words, something shifted inside him. He realized that he had been wrong. The Velcorians did not need to fear struggle. They needed to embrace it. Only then would they truly thrive. The people of Velcor, once divided, now began to come together. The idea of struggle was no longer something to avoid. It was something to embrace. They had learned the value of fighting for their future, of pushing through hardship, and of working together as one. As the sun set over the city, Zalnath looked out at the horizon. The sky was a brilliant orange, casting a warm glow over the landscape. It was a new day for Velcor, a day filled with hope and possibility. They had faced their fears, and now they were ready to build a future where no challenge would be too great. The Velcorians had found salvation not in the comfort they had once known, but in the unbreakable will that humanity had shown them. And with that strength, they would face whatever the future held, knowing that they could overcome anything together.